This is breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jen Ah with the Las Vegas Review-Journal, bringing you some breaking news today. We're getting ready to take you live to a news conference where Governor Steve Sisolak and other Nevada state officials will give us an update on the state's eviction moratorium. Of course, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, announced earlier this week on Monday that the federal moratorium had been extended through the end of March. It had been set to expire originally on Wednesday, and here locally, tenant advocates and groups that work with the homeless applauded the extension. However, there are critics. A spokesperson for the Nevada Apartment Association saying the move was devastating for landlords who are struggling to make ends meet. Back in December, Governor Steve Sisolak extended the state's eviction moratorium through the end of March. Now we're there, and the federal moratorium was extended on Monday. A spokesperson for the governor saying state officials are still determining their next steps. Under the federal moratorium, renters who meet certain criteria cannot be evicted from a residential property. Those who are covered must present a declaration to their landlord stating that they qualify. So here is the big question. Why does the state moratorium matter? Well, a legal aid expert told the Review-Journal that it enacts specific protections for Nevada residents. It prevents things like no-cause evictions, as well as being evicted for not paying rent. Now, we're waiting for this meeting to start with Governor Steve Sisolak and other state officials. They'll be talking about the state's eviction moratorium. And this is really where we're going to see how the state is going to play a role. The federal moratorium has already been extended. The Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, making that announcement earlier this week on Monday that has been extended through the end of June. It had originally been set to expire on Wednesday. And locally, tenant advocates and groups that work with the homeless are applauding this extension, but critics are saying this move can be devastating for landlords who are struggling to make ends meet. Governor Sisolak extended the state's eviction moratorium through the end of March back in December. And after the federal moratorium was extended on Monday, we asked the spokesperson for the governor what the plans are for the state. And the spokesperson said officials are still determining their next steps. Hopefully, they're going to be announcing their next steps here this afternoon at around 3 p.m. That's when they're expected to make this announcement. Under the federal moratorium, renters who meet certain criteria cannot be evicted from a residential property. Those who are covered must present a declaration to their landlord, though, stating that they qualify. And so a lot of people are probably wondering, how does this differ from the federal moratorium and the state moratorium? A legal aid expert telling the Review-Journal that it enacts specific protections for Nevada residents. It prevents things like no-cause evictions, evictions with no cause, as well as being evicted for not paying rent. Now, this event is expected to start on the governor's YouTube channel very soon at around 3 o'clock this afternoon. We're still waiting for the governor's presser to begin. It's about the eviction moratorium for those who are struggling to pay their bills. You know, this is really great news for a lot of those people, the federal moratorium being extended so they won't get kicked out of their homes, and they'll get help from the government keeping them in their homes, whether it's apartments, condos, wherever they live. We're expected to hear from the governor, Steve Sisolak, about what are the plans for the state in terms of the state moratorium. It was supposed to end at the end of March, so it would be ending here shortly, but it looks like most likely he's going to be extending the state moratorium as well. Maybe not. We're still waiting to hear from the governor. This presser from the governor was supposed to start at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It looks like it's running a few minutes late, but he should be speaking shortly. All right, so for those of you just joining us, I'm Jen Ah with Las Vegas Review-Journal. We're getting ready to take you live to a news conference where Governor Steve Sisolak and other Nevada state officials are going to be giving us an update on the state's eviction moratorium. You may have already heard that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, announced on Monday that the federal moratorium has been extended through the end of June. It had originally been set to expire on Wednesday, so that was really good news for a lot of folks who are worried about being kicked out of their homes, unable to pay their bills. Locally, tenant advocate groups that work with the homeless population applauded this extension of the federal moratorium. However, there are critics that say this move is devastating for landlords who are struggling to make ends meet. Governor Steve Sisolak is expected to speak here this afternoon about the state's eviction moratorium. Looks like he's speaking right now. Let's take a listen. Right now, getting ready to speak. We're talking about the federal moratorium being extended on Monday. The spokesperson for the governor saying state officials are determining their next steps. Let's see what those next steps are.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. I want to come before you today to talk about Nevada's residential eviction moratorium. As many of you know, we originally implemented an evictions moratorium early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, in an effort to help everyone be able to stay home for Nevada and slow the spread of COVID-19. Throughout the pandemic, this moratorium has been extended as the situation with COVID-19 evolved. And over the last year, the state has partnered with counties to set up rental assistance programs and work with the judiciary and the legislature to create a rental mediation program. Much progress has been made, but there is still more work to be done. Our state is currently going through a large-scale transition period as we continue to navigate the ever-evolving pandemic and subsequent crises. Kids are back in school. We're in the process of transitioning mitigation authority to local governments, and people are heading back to their workplaces. The transition process for each of these areas has been strategic, and Nevada's housing situation is no different. We must transition out of our eviction moratorium, but do so in a way that protects tenants and landlords to the greatest extent possible. That is why today I am announcing that I will be issuing an emergency directive that extends the current state eviction moratorium for 2 more months. At the end of May, the state moratorium will come to an end and will not be extended again. Today's extension comes with one additional requirement. When landlords provide notices to tenants during this time period, they must, repeat, they must also include information on on available rental assistance programs and how tenants can access them. Help is available for those in need, but only if they know about it. I have also asked stakeholders across the state to increase efforts to inform the public on available rental assistance to ensure Nevadans can stay in their homes and landlords can get the money they are owed. As many of you know, yesterday, the CDC issued an extension on the federal eviction moratorium for 90 days. The CDC order, out of necessity, is broad and applies nationwide. In reality, however, every state's eviction laws are different, with different eviction notices and different court procedures. That's why our state eviction moratorium is so important during this transition period. It will continue to provide clear direction to courts, eliminating much of the confusion and burden on judicial resources, and it will help keep eligible tenants housed. Additionally, this 2-month extension of the state eviction moratorium will allow much needed time for stakeholders throughout the state to ensure processes are developed and programs are set up to be implemented effectively. Thanks to President Biden and a majority of members from our federal delegation, the state is receiving millions in rental assistance from the American Rescue Plan, on top of funding already received. But this money must get out the door faster. We don't want to send federal money set aside specifically for rental assistance back to Washington, D.C. This money belongs in Nevada. By extending this moratorium, my expectation is that all stakeholders will work together to ensure systems are created to get these dollars out the door faster to help both landlords and tenants. It does not make sense to put thousands of tenants at risk of eviction when rental assistance dollars are available, especially when we know that massive evictions will cause public health concerns and irreparable harm to Nevada families still struggling from the pandemic. And the reality is landlords are struggling too. They deserve to be paid for the last year, and the money is there to make them whole. I've asked all partners throughout the state to do everything we can to get it to them. Originally, I did not plan on extending this moratorium today, but I'm not going to put thousands of Nevadans at risk of losing their homes while funding exists to help them and the landlords. By the end of this 2 months, I expect that plans are developed and implemented to get rental assistance into the hands of landlords to keep tenants in their homes. Additionally, this extension will allow more time for Nevadans to get vaccinated and for our economy to continue to recover, which will help our housing crisis as well. Now more than ever, there is hope on the horizon for the end of this pandemic. Our cases, hospitalizations, and positivity rates are continuing to drop because Nevadans have come together under the collective goal to slow the spread of this deadly virus. We're administering vaccine as fast as our federal allocation allows us. We are closer to the end than to the beginning, but there is still a lot of work ahead, and it's because of you we're doing so well. Again, at the end of May, the eviction moratorium for the state of Nevada will end, while the CDC protections will stay in place for another 30 days. During that 30-day period, eviction case filings may resume in the courts, but renters will still be protected from actual eviction through the end of the CDC moratorium. In a moment, you're going to hear from some of the stakeholders we have been working with, including Kevin Schiller from Clark County. We have worked collaboratively with Clark County, where 72% of all state evictions are handled in one court. For example, Clark County is working on a process to pre-qualify tenants and landlords for rental assistance, so by the time of the mediation or court hearing, timely payments of rental assistance can resolve the case. But more importantly, if the landlords are being paid now during this pause, evictions will be avoided. I've also invited Shannon Chambers from Home Means Nevada, who will share more information on plans for the next 2 months. Finally, we will hear from Assembly Speaker Jason Frierson and Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro about ongoing work in the Nevada legislature that will align with the 60-day timeline as well. I want to thank them in advance for their work to figure out what can be done legislatively to help both tenants and landlords. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Shannon Chambers, who will speak briefly and will be followed by Kevin Schiller. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Governor Sisolak. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And thank you everybody on this call today. My name is Shannon Chambers. I'm the president of Home Means Nevada. I'm also the Nevada Labor Commissioner, so I get a unique perspective on all of these issues. And I want to again thank the governor and his staff for dedicating the resources and developing solutions on these issues. In October of 2020, Home Means Nevada became responsible for the rental eviction mediation program that was created through the last special session of the Nevada legislature. We deployed that program very rapidly and very quickly and established a website specifically for the program called the Renter Connect. This is a website that has a vast amount of resources for tenants, landlords, attorneys, for the courts, for the mediators, to provide information on rental assistance, legal aid, various different issues, CDC declarations, the tenant declarations required under the moratorium. As the rental eviction mediation program became deployed, we worked with the courts, mainly with the Las Vegas Justice Court, but with all the courts in the state of Nevada to implement that program effectively and quickly. So between the period of October 2020 through December of 2020, we processed over 1,300 cases through the rental eviction mediation program. There were many success stories through that program and many tenants that were able to stay in their residence. What we also realized in working with the various partners and the stakeholders was that given the time frame of the eviction notice, from eviction notice to the eviction hearing, we were dealing with a very, very short time frame, and the ability to get tenants prioritized for rental assistance or for landlords to get prioritized to obtain rental assistance was a challenge. So Home Means Nevada worked with the courts, the Nevada Supreme Court, with the counties, with the governor's office, with the different homeowner organizations, with the rental associations, to try and come up with a plan to make this process much quicker and much more efficient. So in the past 2 months, Home Means Nevada has been working with the other partners to develop a plan that we will implement over the next 60 days. Part of that plan will be to prioritize the cases that are sitting in the court system now. The majority of those cases are in Las Vegas Justice Court and Clark County. So we will be working with them extensively to prioritize those cases, to send those cases that are appropriate for mediation through mediation, for the cases that are not appropriate for mediation, to work with the courts and Clark County to prioritize those cases for rental assistance if they are eligible. So we are all committed to making this plan work over the next 60 days. It has been my opinion as the president of Home Means Nevada that we cannot lose any more time. And so while a moratorium does buy some more time, we have to be effective and efficient in how we process that time and how we work through these issues. So over the next 60 days, Home Means Nevada will be working with the other partners, like I said, the courts, the counties, the local jurisdictions, with the apartment associations, with the landlords, to develop a plan that will prioritize rental assistance applications as they go through the courts or go through mediation. And for those that are somewhere in between, we will implement a voluntary mediation program so that tenants and landlords can sit down with a mediator and potentially work through their issues and come to an agreement. The important point about mediation is that it is free. It is free to the tenant. It is free for the landlord. And it is a very effective process that can produce very effective results. I can tell you from personal experience, having administered the rental eviction mediation program, we heard testimonials from both landlords and tenants that they were so grateful to have the opportunity to sit down with a third party to work through their issues and to be pointed in the right direction of rental assistance and where they needed to go. Again, that's only part of the solution, but it is a big part of the solution that will become another building block for the courts to work through and for the counties to work through, and to make this process, again, a much more efficient and effective process, and to prioritize those cases that do need to prioritize for rental assistance, and to get those decisions in a very quick and timely manner so that cases do not end up in the courts when this latest moratorium ends at the end of May. So again, Home Means Nevada is more than grateful to be part of this and to be tasked with this by the governor's office and by the governor himself, and we look forward to working with all those partners going forward. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Kevin Schiller, who is the Assistant County Manager for Clark County, who will play a very, very big part in implementing this plan. And Mr. Schiller has been very great to work with, and appreciate his time and effort. So go ahead, Mr. Schiller. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shannon. I first want to thank Governor Sisolak and his staff on behalf of Clark County for their continued efforts, especially as we battle this pandemic and face evictions, and both the tenants and the landlords. On that note, with this 60-day extension, I think two pieces that I want to make sure I highlight is we had changes in the rental assistance programming and eligibility requirements that occurred at the end of December going into January with the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. Some of those key tenets is we obviously are extending 60 days and we need people to get applications into the queue. That website is chap.clarkcountynv.gov. Again, chap.clarkcounty.mv.gov. If you are in the queue or if you are not in the queue, either way, you need to go in and update your application. Two main requirements that have occurred is obviously the tenant must apply. It can no longer be applied for by your landlord. If that occurred in your previous process, it needs to be applied for by you at this point. Documentation is a critical component of this for all of you out there that are listening. So you have to do two main pieces. One is proof of income, which will be tied to your tax returns, pay stubs, unemployment insurance payments, so you can prove that. Other piece is landlord documentation tied to your statement of arrears. And then also your landlord will be putting in a W-9 and some of that documentation. Two key pieces that I want to make sure I emphasize to this again is if you are in the queue, you have your spot in line in the queue, and we have continued to process applications while we update those requirements. If you're in that queue and you update those within the next 30 days, you maintain your spot within that. If you are applying as a new applicant, you need to get on there as soon as possible to get that documentation and that completed application. What does the income eligibility mean? So if you are 80% of affordable median income, the translation for you is, and I'm just giving the example, a family of four could earn up to about $60,000. There's more detail on the website specifically tied to this. And we want to make sure in that documentation that you can provide that one member of your household was impacted by COVID. Another piece that I want to make sure is very clear is we have updated our portal so that that documentation can be uploaded quickly. And then on the landlord side, there will also be an updated portal in about 10 days where you can upload that information from the landlord side. Residency and citizenship, you must be a resident of Clark County. Undocumented individuals are eligible for rental assistance. In follow-up to Ms. Chambers, I want to emphasize we are working with the eviction courts and we currently have data from them specific to evictions that have been filed. If you have received an eviction notice at any level, it is very important that you respond to that eviction while we're working on your application and your process. So I want to put out two numbers. One is to Legal Aid of Southern Nevada, 702-386-1070 or 702-671-3976. You need to contact them if you need assistance in regard to your eviction notice and or process. If you are in the eviction queue, we are prioritizing that through work with our partners and Ms. Chambers and Legal Aid. So what we will be doing is reaching out to you, and you may be hearing from us sooner rather than later as we have a list of those currently. To give some sense on timeframes, one of the key pieces is when we ended the initial rental assistance based on the initial federal allocation, there were still 12,000 applications that were sitting in that queue when we started with our next round of federal funding. That is what's currently being utilized. That will serve up to approximately 40,000 households in total, at a total of $161 million in conjunction with the state and local jurisdictions dollars. Again, I want to emphasize if you are in the queue, you must go back to the website and update your information. And if you are listening to this and are in crisis, we need to make sure you go to chap.clarkcountynv.gov and get your information in. With that, I really want to extend a gracious thanks to Governor Sisolak and all of the stakeholders in relationship to this, as we really want to get these dollars out over the next 60 days and prioritize those needs. The last piece is if you contact, the other pieces that I want to make sure everybody is aware, we will be working on rehousing. If you apply for assistance and you aren't eligible, we still have you in our queue to work on rehousing you and getting you into an apartment or into a residence so that you are not homeless. And with that, I'll hand it back to Governor Sisolak.
Thank you, Shannon and Kevin, both for being here and joining us today and providing this important update. As I mentioned, I have also invited Speaker Frierson and Majority Leader Canizaro to be here and speak briefly today. So with that, I'll introduce Speaker Jason Frierson.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you all for being here today. As you all know, we're coming out of a crisis brought on by COVID-19 and the pandemic. Nevadans are going back to work. Kids are going back to school. But the impacts from the pandemic, they'll linger beyond the transition to this new normal. Nevada families are looking for us to help them get back on their feet, and extending the eviction moratorium will allow us to do that. This extension gives state, local, and county entities time to fine-tune and implement procedures to give rental assistance dollars to landlords as well as tenants more quickly and efficiently. It also gives the legislature and other elected bodies time to work with stakeholders to make sure that our landlords and our tenants have access to available assistance dollars. As we receive more federal rental assistance dollars to help landlords and tenants pay their rent back, we can also make sure that we have programs in place to ensure that we utilize as much of this assistance as possible. We have, of course, gotten direction from the federal government on the federal moratorium, and so it makes sense that we would follow suit and try to partner up with our stakeholders in order to best, meet the needs of both tenants as well as landlords. And as the governor pointed out, this is about both tenants and landlords. This is about our community. So I'm looking forward to working with the governor, the Senate, and the stakeholders over the next 2 months to ensure that our tenants and also our landlords are protected as we transition to a new phase of this pandemic. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to my colleague in the Senate, Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro, who we have been also working with the governor and other stakeholders to try to come up with ways to come out of this situation, keeping everybody in their homes.
I'm sorry, Majority Leader, you're on mute still.
Thank you. And thank you, Speaker Frierson, for your introduction. I wanted to take the time to thank Governor Sisolak for taking action today to extend our state's eviction moratorium. We're all very excited, of course, to see that vaccinations are increasing daily, that cases are dropping, and that there are signs that our economy is beginning to recover. But we know that many families are still suffering from the public health and economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for many families, one of those consequences is the risk of losing their homes. I think we all agree that an eviction crisis would be devastating for Nevadans and our economic recovery, as well as our landlords who have been weathering the storm. And it is absolutely critical that we prevent thousands of Nevada families from being thrown into any more turmoil because of a situation that is beyond their control. What's important to note as we have this conversation is that we have resources available through federal aid programs to provide direct rental assistance to Nevadans who are struggling with their rent, and also to provide assistance to those landlords who have been also working through this pandemic. In fact, nearly $90 million in rental assistance has already been distributed through state and local partnerships. But with tens of millions in relief aid still available and potentially more coming, what we need is more time to get that money out the door. Today's extension, the addition of new notice requirements for landlords and other steps to streamline the rental assistance program outlined by our partners will help ensure that that happens. Over the remaining 2 months, I very much look forward to, during this legislative session, working with local jurisdictions, our state agencies, and our community partners to assist renters to get caught up on their rent and to provide that critical assistance to our landlords. We're ready and willing to work on legislative initiatives that can help our local partners speed up distribution, help keep tenants in their homes, and stop preventable income losses for property owners. If Nevadans who are renters take away any message from today, it is that there is help available if you are facing a potential eviction or housing crisis, and it's not too late. I look forward to working with Speaker Frierson and my legislative colleagues to ensure that we can tackle this issue comprehensively over the next 2 months. I also wanted to thank the governor for his leadership throughout this pandemic. And for those of you who are paying attention and are our renters and our landlords, please know that there is help available, and that if you need help, to make sure that you please do apply today. And thank you again for having me today. Thanks.
Thank you both very much for being here. I could not ask for two better partners to work through this entire pandemic crisis with. And to you and your colleagues, I can't thank you enough for everything that you do on a daily basis. And thank you for your commitment to working together for the next 2 months on this extremely critical issue. Before we take questions, I want to speak directly to Nevadans. If you are nervous about losing your home because you've been negatively impacted by this pandemic, right now is the time to engage with rental assistance programs. Please take advantage of this. Help is here, but it's up to you. I want to reiterate, Nevada's eviction moratorium will end in 2 months, and the CDC moratorium ends in 3 months or 90 days. It's my expectation that stakeholders will work together to get all of these pieces into place to protect tenants and landlords. Thank you very much. I encourage you to continue to wear masks, socially distance, and bring an end to this pandemic. And I'll now take some questions, and Megan is going to take the lead here.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Majority Leader, Speaker Shannon, and Kevin for joining the Governor today. I see I already have some hands up on the Zoom. If you'd like to get in the line to ask a question, please use the raise hand feature. You can find that under reactions. We'll go to Terry Russell for the first question, and Tiffany, you're on deck.
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to know if you know at this point how much money is being sent to the state under this program, the rules of it, i.e., when does it have to be spent, the money, and what percentage of the money goes to renters and what percentage goes to the landlords? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Terry. I actually think that Shannon Chambers from Home Means Nevada might have some of those figures readily available.
So actually, Megan, it's probably Kevin Schiller that would be better expert on that because they're actually distributing the funds.
For the record, Kevin Schiller. So on the funding component side of this, speaking specifically to the allocation in Clark County, there will be a total of $161 million. That's a combination of City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, North Las Vegas, Clark County's funding, and the state's approximate $92 million to support the programming. To your second question on how much goes to tenants and how much goes to landlords. So the way the process works is a statement of arrears is given to us in that application process under that Treasury guidance. Once they are deemed eligible, we provide payment for that total arrears to the landlord directly. There is the ability to pay the client directly after you've exhausted efforts and other means. But the primary issue is getting the dollars to the tenant or to the landlord based on the tenant's arrears. In the current process here, we will be paying at the point that that is approved. We will pay within the month that they actually were approved, going back all the way in their arrears.
Thank you, Terry. We'll go to Tiffany for the next question, and then Colton.
Hello, Governor. Thank you so much for taking my question. I know that this is a plan in place with the eviction moratorium being extended for the next 2 months, but what is the long-term plan? I'm assuming that, even after 2 months, that not all of the assistance will get to everyone who needs it. What's the plan in the long run so that people don't end up in the streets over the next few years following just the impacts from COVID-19?
Well, clearly, we want to do everything we can to keep people in their homes, to keep them safe, and to keep them housed. What we need to do is we've extended the moratorium twice since I initially put it in place already. This is the last extension for the moratorium. The eviction process will have to start taking place. In fact, after 60 days, people will be able to go into court, landlords will, and file, but nobody will be evicted for the remaining 30 days of the CDC. We are hopeful, and I'm confident that we will get back to our new normal. This is a situation with a lot of different issues, whether it's giving the control back to the local counties for jurisdiction, whether this is getting people back to closer occupancy in some of our businesses, more capacity and so forth. We're getting back to the new normal, and this is another one of the items that is going to be coming back to the new normal as we get through this extension.
Thanks for the question, Tiffany. And I'm sorry I didn't get my words out fast enough when Terry asked her question. We'll be happy to send you more specifics on the dollars coming to Nevada from federal sources specifically for rental assistance. I'll follow up with you on that. So we'll go to Colton for the next question, and then Austin, you're on deck.
Shannon mentioned that the programs would be prioritizing people or cases that are currently in the court system, and I'm guessing that's the evictions currently in the system. Is there an estimate or a number as to how many people in Nevada are currently facing evictions?
So thank you for the question, Colton. So this is Shannon again. So the estimates in Clark County is over 3,500 that are kind of in the court system right now. So that's the best information in the court system now. I have seen data that, again, with Clark County being the largest population and biggest county, that it's anywhere between 5 to 7% of residents potentially facing eviction in Clark County alone. But the main goal right now in implementing this plan over the next 60 days is to address those court cases that are sitting there right now so that those individuals, if they're eligible for rental assistance, can get that assistance so that they don't go back into a cycle of facing eviction that they may have been facing 2 months ago when the previous moratorium was extended.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for the question, Colton. We'll go to Austin, and then Michelle Rendells will be next.
Hey, Megan and Governor Sisolak, thank you so much for taking my question. Just last week, we had reported that 23,000 households in Clark County still have not received that rental assistance. I know you guys now are urging people to fill out those applications if they need the help. But what do you say to some of the tenants and landlords that we've spoken to just over the past couple of weeks and months who, did the right thing, their applications were in, and they are still waiting on that funding? What can they do right now? What piece of advice can you give them?
Thanks for the question, Austin. Kevin, did you want to speak to that process? I think you did a little bit in your remarks.
Absolutely. Austin, so two key pieces, and I touched on this a little bit. At the point that funding in the initial federal rental assistance came forward in December, when that funding was exhausted, there were about 12,000 individuals that were sitting in that queue. Since January, we received an additional over 1,000 a week in those applications. Specific to your question of what to tell people and people that are sitting, you are in the queue and we are processing based on the new requirements. Two key pieces, though, that I would focus on is we had to update our portal with all the new federal requirements based on the second round of dollars. So that went into effect about 2 weeks ago. With that, prior to that, we had processed in upwards of about 4,000 to 4,500 applications in a manual process. So people that are sitting there, their application is in the queue. The key piece I want to get out, and if you get asked questions about this, is make sure they go in and update their application based on the new requirements and the documentation. That is the critical piece so that it can be expedited once we get to it. Again, the total numbers, I want to make sure I talk to that. When you talk about 23,000, the issue of total households we'll be able to serve is about 40,000. So there's plenty of room in that queue for people to apply and get their documentation in. And then we anticipate on a weekly basis processing it's in upwards of about 2,300 applications a week towards approval. So that's the number we're shooting with in terms of those weekly averages.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you, Kevin. We'll do, I think I said Michelle Rendells, and then we'll do Jacqueline, and then I think that's all the questions we have. So after those two, we'll pull to a close.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for taking the question. I wanted to ask if you have any plans to lift the state's mask mandate, as we've seen in other states. And if not, what metrics are you going to use to decide when to do that?
I have made a commitment, Michelle, that Nevada, Las Vegas in particular, when you're talking about the Strip, is going to be the safest, healthiest place to come visit. And I'm going to continue to follow through with that commitment. We have no intention of lifting the mask mandate. And my commitment right now and my efforts are being put into vaccinations. I want to get a needle into every arm that we possibly can. And if the time comes, or when the time comes, that we can lift the mask mandate, we'll go ahead. But in the immediate foreseeable future, we are not lifting the mask mandate. I want to make it, like, say, a safe place for people to come on vacation, safe place for conventions and meetings, and mask wearing and social distancing protocols and the like are part of that equation.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks, Michelle. We'll go to Jacqueline, and then I see a couple more hands popped up, so we'll see if we have time to get a couple more in.
Good afternoon, everyone. For Kevin or for Shannon in particular, I've heard from a lot of either tenants or landlords that CHAP's application can be clunky, and a big barrier to completing it is participation. Sometimes the landlord does not want to participate, and then the tenant has trouble being able to get the application in, or the landlord has a tenant that's not cooperative? How do these new processes in place where the tenant has to apply, how can that maybe help the parties here?
So this is Kevin. I'll go first, Shannon. Two pieces. One is your comments are not far off. There has been a lot of frustration around both ends in terms of participation. Two things I would emphasize. One, on the applicant side, we are actually launching with multiple nonprofits, essentially a support system that will be reaching out to all of those clients in terms of handholding and helping them get documentation in. So that's a critical piece. On the landlord side, I mentioned it in my comments that we are going live with a secondary access point for landlords only to the portal. That purpose is because when they download W-9 tax information and information that they may not want to share, it will maintain confidentiality and it doesn't go to the clients. It actually goes directly into the portal. So those are two key pieces that we're working towards. And then I'll kick it to Shannon, but I know also on the mediation side, they've experienced same frustrations that we've tried to work through in terms of our support protocols.
No, and I would just echo what Mr. Schiller said, that through the mediation part of it, that we are going to devote staff to help the tenants and help the landlords get the documents that are required, help them with the application process, and the term is hand-holding. And what we found is that many individuals need help. They need help navigating the portal. They need help knowing exactly what documents they need. And through the mediation process, that's where a mediator can help. But working in conjunction with Kevin's staff, we feel confident that taking that extra step to really give them some personal attention in that application process will make a big difference.
Thank you for the question. And with the governor's go ahead, I think we'll maybe take a couple more. We'll get some of the folks who haven't had a chance to ask a question yet. We'll start with Orko and then we'll go to Sam.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking my question. I know you said we have several hundred people in the court system right now waiting, and I would imagine more people will join now with this update. With the eviction moratorium here ending at the end of May, is there kind of a cutoff point where if they start the process, regardless of if it's, we are past May, will they be able to go through the process without getting evicted, or is the end of May a hard deadline?
So this is Shannon. I can't speak to what the legislature might do through the end of this session. What I can tell you is the existing laws that govern eviction are very fast. So it's typically a 30 to 45 day process. What's also important to remember under the CDC moratorium and under the governor's new moratorium is there are certain evictions that can still go forward because they don't involve anything related to COVID. So at the end of May, obviously, Home Means Nevada will work with the courts and work with the Supreme Court and work with the partners to evaluate what court cases we've been able to get through in the previous 60 days. And then going forward, there will likely be some cases that will end up in the court system. What the option there would then be is they have the option of requesting mediation. So there might be some cases that do end up in eviction, but there might be some cases after the moratorium ends that go through mediation and there's a resolution that's able to be worked out.
Thank you. I think Kevin wanted to add something here and then we'll go to Sam's question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to your question. I think a good question. And one of the key pieces is because of this process that's been initiated by the state in conjunction with all the stakeholders in the courts, we actually have the list of those set evictions that we're working through. But to your point of those that are in a process and what that outcome may look like, we also are automatically putting them into, if they are at the risk of homelessness and let's say the eviction goes through, we have them in a rapid rehousing program. And that happens at a statewide level also. So we will have them in the queue to rehouse them to avoid the homelessness. So there's a somewhat of a safety net and a service array that's sitting there, which is actually very opportunistic and hasn't occurred with the courts historically. So this has been a great collaboration.
Thank you. And I think we'll take a final question from Sam and we can follow up with additional questions afterward. We want to make sure we let folks like Shannon and Kevin get back to processing applications as quickly as possible. So Sam, I think we'll go ahead with you for the last question.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Apologies if I haven't done my homework on the differences between the state and federal moratorium. You said that the importance of having a state moratorium on top of the CDCs stemmed from every state having different eviction laws. I'm wondering, by that logic, why we don't align our timeline with the federal government's moratorium, which ends in 90 days rather than 60.
You want me to go on that one, Megan?
Sure, Governor.
Okay, the idea was that the CDC came in at 90 days. Ours is a little different than the federal's, the CDC moratorium is. We want an opportunity for after the 60 days expires, that someone, a landlord, can go in and start to file papers. No one can get evicted while the CDC moratorium is in place. They'll still be protected. They won't become homeless and won't lose their housing, but it'll get our process started while the clock runs on the CDC moratorium.
Thank you. And I think unless Shannon or Kevin have anything to add, we'll do a close today. Thank you all for joining us and for being here. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me and we'll get you answers as quickly as we can. So with that, Governor, if you have anything to add before we close.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Megan. I want to give Jason and Nicole a chance to say just a closing remark if they have one. I want to thank everyone for participating today. We're doing everything we can to get the landlords and the tenants and the money all connected so we can get the money into the hands of the landlords. And I want to have another shout out to Treasurer Zach Honine, who's been an incredible partner in terms of working through these processes, and Chief Justice Hardesty to get the money into people's hands. And please continue to do everything you can to assist us in stopping the spread of COVID. Continue to wear a mask, to practice social distancing. And when you're eligible for a vaccine, which everyone is going to be, everyone over the age of 16 is going to be eligible this Monday. As soon as you're eligible, please make an appointment, go get the vaccine. And we're closer to the end than we're at the beginning, but getting everyone vaccinated is an important part of that. So, Jason or Nicole, are you there? Do you have anything you want to add in?
Sure, Governor. I again, thank you for your commitment in this regard. I'll just say this. I want all of the stakeholders to know that we have heard you. We understand that there are tenants in need, but we also understand that there are landlords in need. We understand that this has to be a balanced approach, and I am excited to hear the progress that's been made, in particular in Clark County, about being able to expedite the processing, which has been held up for some time, largely due to federal requirements for qualifications and eligibility. So it sounds like we have worked through a lot of that, and we are ready to get going and get relief where it's needed. We hear you realtors, we hear you landlords, and we hear you tenants. And we are committed to making sure that we expedite resolving this to keep everybody in their homes and make sure that we make folks that are hurting as whole as we possibly can.
And thank you again, Governor. This really does take, I think, a team effort and all of us working together to ensure that we can get relief to tenants and also to the speaker's point, to landlords who have been sort of weathering this storm along with us. And I think this is a good step in the right direction to ensure that we can get funds where they need to go and to keep people in their homes and start to get, this state back on a path to recovery, which I think we have seen and have to continue to build on. And we're going to be able to do that together, working through the next 60 days with the legislature and with the governor's office, and just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to work out this plan so that we can have that balanced approach that the speaker mentioned in tackling this issue. And thank you again for having us here, and looking forward to working with you over the next 60 days.
Thank you both.
All right, you're just hearing Governor Steve Sisolak and other Nevada officials discussing the state's eviction moratorium. They're wrapping up their statements there. The governor just announcing extending the state moratorium for 2 more months, so until the end of May. He says, though, he won't be extending it again. He stressed that every state's eviction laws are different, and that's why it's so important that our state's moratorium is extended for 2 more months to help keep tenants in their homes. He says the state is receiving millions from the American Rescue Plan by President Biden in terms of rental assistance. And so by extending this moratorium, he helps to help those landlords and tenants. He stressed that landlords are struggling financially as well, and he wants to help them. Originally, he says he was not thinking of extending the state's moratorium, but he doesn't want to kick out struggling tenants. And he says he doesn't plan to extend it again after May. This 2-month extension again will end at the end of May. Eviction moratorium will end in the state. However, the federal moratorium will end in June, end of June. Renters will be projected through the end of June for the federal program, in May for the state program. And Home Means Nevada board president spoke about the programs that are launched for both tenants and landlords when it comes to rental assistance and legal aid. They say they've dealt with thousands of cases through the rental remediation program to come up with a plan to make the program more efficient and go more quickly. There are a lot of people still stuck in the system. And Home Means Nevada says they'll continue to do so for the next 60 days. These programs are free to the public, so they're urging those struggling to pay their bills to apply for these programs. The Clark County Assistant Manager then talked about how they need people to get the applications in as soon as possible within the 60 days if they want to stay in their homes. And there are more documentations that are now needing to be submitted in terms of income eligibility and landlord documentation, and that the county is working with the eviction courts to get these applications processed as soon as possible. They'll be prioritizing those who've already applied and are already in the system. State leaders also spoke about the fact that a lot of people are going back to work now, kids are going back to school, but that the financial toll is still being felt. And so this extension gives those people struggling more assistance to help pay their bills back, calling this a new phase of the pandemic that they want to get people out of the situation, but still in their homes. And state leaders also spoke about the fact that these programs are available online still right now. People can apply for them or call. And their goal right now is to really speed up the distribution of these federal dollars to those who need it. And the governor urging those who are nervous about losing their home to take advantage of these rental assistance programs, which will end in 2 months at the end of May. The federal program, the federal moratorium, ending in 3 months at the end of June. We'll continue to monitor the story for you as it develops, so stay tuned. And for more details, head over to our website, lvrj.com. We'll also have updates this evening at 7 p.m., our evening newscast, and tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I'm Jen Ah. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll see you at 7 tonight.
You've been watching breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.